The banquet hall was drowned in velvet shadows and soft golden light, a masquerade of peace draped over centuries of blood. Polished mahogany tables stretched from one end to the other, lined with towering arrangements of white moon lilies, the sacred flower of interpack unity. But unity was a myth. Aria Winters knew better than to believe in fairy tales. She clutched the silver tray tighter, the polished glasses clinking faintly as she moved between the high-backed chairs of alpha heirs, dignitaries, and warriors. Her head was lowered, eyes fixed on the floor, as she moved with the quiet precision expected of a servant. An omega. A nobody. Yet even nobodies could feel it, the storm in the air. It wasn't the cold northern wind howling outside the great mountain hall of Wintercrest. It was something else, something primal, electric. Her pulse ticked like a metronome in her throat, and her wolf stirred uneasily beneath her skin. Then it happened. His scent hit her like lightning. Crisp pine, smoldering embers, the sharp bite of winter steel. Her knees nearly buckled. She raised her eyes just for a second, one heartbeat, and there he was. Kael Riven, Bloodfang Beta, Future Alpha, the coldest, most lethal male in the room. His suit was ink black, his tie loose around his throat like it chafed him. His eyes, silver gray and sharp as blades, locked onto hers across the hall like a weapon had been unsheathed. The bond surged. Oh, moon goddess, no, no, no. Her tray slipped, a glass shattered at her feet, heads turned, the sound echoed. But Aria couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Because Kael was still staring, the color drained from his face as he took a step forward. One, then two. Every nerve in her body screamed as the mate bond latched between them, raw, electric, unmistakable, a golden tether strung between two souls destined by the stars. And then he stopped. Kael's lips parted. You? It wasn't awe, it wasn't disbelief, it was disgust. The golden thread snapped, not literally, but it might as well have. He didn't need to shout. His voice cut clean through the air like a blade. I reject you. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the alphas paused mid-drink. Some looked amused, others shocked. A few pitied her. Aria's heart collapsed in on itself like a dying star. She stood frozen, the bond still buzzing like a ghost under her skin. Her wolf whimpered inside her, clawing at her ribs. And Kael? He didn't even flinch. He turned and walked back to his table, not sparing her another glance. He rejected her. Before they even spoke a single word. Aria didn't cry that night. She ran. Out the side doors of the hall, down the marble steps, into the snow-drenched woods where her breath fogged the air like smoke, and her tears burned hotter than fire. She ran until her lungs screamed and her legs gave out, until she collapsed beneath a silver tree, clawing at the snow like it might bury her alive. I didn't ask for this, she choked out to the stars. I didn't want him, but her wolf didn't answer. Neither did the goddess. Just the wind. Cold, silent, indifferent. The snow soaked through her dress until it clung like second skin, icy and humiliating. Aria didn't move. Hours had passed, maybe longer, she had no idea. The night sky above her looked like shattered obsidian, cracked with stars. The soft hush of snowfall around her should have been calming, but it wasn't. Her entire body trembled, not from the cold, but from the bond's cruel aftermath. A rejection wasn't just emotional, it was physical, like someone had reached into her chest and ripped something out. Her wolf lay silent within her, curled in on itself, wounded. Distant. That silence hurt more than Kael's voice. She'd read about rejections, heard whispers from the elders about how rare they were, how painful, how unnatural. But no one told her the worst part, the guilt, as if she'd done something wrong by simply existing. The next morning she returned to the Nightvale camp bruised and pale. No one asked questions. No one offered comfort. Not even her own alpha. They all knew. The whispers started the second she walked into the kitchen hall. Did you hear? A beta of Bloodfang rejected her, in public. Poor thing. What did she expect? An omega like her matched with him? Aria kept her head down and scrubbed pots until her knuckles bled. She didn't eat, didn't sleep, didn't speak. Every time she closed her eyes she saw him. Kael Riven, 6 feet and 4 inches of stone, and those eyes, silver, icy, final. She hated how she still felt him in her veins, like a phantom limb. Weeks later the summit ended. Her pack returned home, nestled in the frost-kissed valley of the mountains. Life went on, except for Aria. The kitchen work became heavier. The others treated her differently now. Rejected omegas carried a taint, like bad luck, as if her presence might infect their fates. She was the girl whose mate looked her in the eyes and said no. That kind of shame stuck. She endured it, quietly, fiercely. But something changed in her, deep beneath the pain. A spark. Aria stopped shrinking. She began waking up before dawn, sneaking into the woods where the warriors trained. She stood behind the trees, watching their forms, mimicking their stances. When the forest was empty, she practiced, alone, in silence. At first she was clumsy, weak, but repetition gave birth to rhythm, and rhythm gave birth to strength. She trained in secret, arms aching, knees scraped, body pushed until her wolf began to stir again. Each movement said, "I am not broken. I am not his. I am mine." Kael sat in his office, the firelight casting amber shadows across the worn map on his desk. His hands were ink-stained and trembling. He was restless. "The Omega," he muttered to himself, swallowing the bitter taste on his tongue. Aria Winters. He hadn't expected the bond to spark at all, especially not with her. He remembered her eyes, wide, brown, startled like a deer caught in moonlight. She looked at him like he was home, and he'd gutted her with 2 words. Kael had rejected her because he had no choice. He wasn't ready to be mated. His world was blood, duty, strategy, and strength. There was no room for softness, for vulnerability, for her. But what haunted him was the way she didn't cry, didn't beg. She just stood there, trembling, but proud, like he wasn't the one with power anymore. He cursed and ran a hand through his dark hair. His wolf paced restlessly inside him. "She still lingers," it growled. "Fix it. Go to her." But Kael didn't move. Couldn't. He chose this, and now he had to live with it. 3 months later, the summoning a parchment letter arrived in the hands of Nightvale's Alpha, sealed with wax and the crest of a raven's wing. Kael's uncle, the Alpha of Bloodfang, was calling for peacekeepers. Someone from Nightvale was to be sent to Bloodfang territory as a diplomatic liaison. Someone young, flexible, easily monitored, someone expendable, Aria. Her Alpha called her into his study without ceremony, told her she'd been selected to represent their pack, that it was an honor. But Aria wasn't naive. It was a punishment, a test, and still, she nodded. Fine. The day she left, no one saw her off. She packed a single bag, wrapped her fingers around the leather strap, and walked into the snowy horizon without looking back. She didn't cry, didn't flinch, and as she crossed into enemy territory, with the looming shadow of Bloodfang's stone fortress rising in the distance, Aria whispered, "Let him see me now." The Bloodfang fortress rose like a wound against the sky. Carved into the spine of the northern mountains, its towers loomed black and cold, laced with iron and silver charms to ward off rogues. No warmth, no beauty, just stone and shadows and sharp lines, like the pack that ruled it. Aria stood at its gates, her boots crunching in the ice-laced gravel. Behind her, a carriage pulled away, leaving only her breath fogging in the bitter air. She didn't shiver. A Bloodfang guard stepped forward. Name. She met his eyes, a rarity for an Omega. Aria Winters, Nightvale emissary. The guard blinked, clearly not expecting defiance. He waved her in. As she passed under the massive archway, she felt the weight of history press down. This was the seat of monsters, of warriors, of Kael. And now, hers too. Inside the fortress, the halls were colder than outside. No windows, no welcome. Just stone and silence and the scent of steel. She was led past tapestries of past Alphas, all scowling men with blood-stained swords, until the guard stopped outside a heavy oak door. "Wait here," she heard voices inside. Then, his voice. Kael, deep, sharp, distant. Her pulse betrayed her, ticking like a war drum beneath her skin. She straightened her shoulders, steeling herself. The door opened. He stood on the far end of a war table, surrounded by advisors. Maps, pins, and reports littered the surface. He looked the same, and not. Taller than she remembered. Broader. Wrapped in tailored black and power. Their eyes met, and for one excruciating second, the bond tried to crawl back to life. A flicker, a heartbeat, a tug. He broke it first. Dismissed, he said to the others. Once they were alone, Kael circled the table slowly, eyes unreadable. "You've changed." Aria didn't blink. "So have you." He tilted his head. "Why are you here, really? Ask your uncle. I go where my alpha sends me." "I thought you'd still be licking your wounds," he said coldly. Aria smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You don't get to wound me anymore." That made him pause. Just a flicker of something. Surprise? Before the frost returned. "You'll stay in the East Wing. You'll attend political briefings and represent your pack during negotiations. Keep your head down, speak when spoken to, and do not cause problems." She stepped forward, close enough to smell the familiar scent she hated herself for still remembering. "Don't worry," she said softly. "You rejected me, remember? You made it clear I'm nothing to you." Something flared in his eyes, but he said nothing. The room was nicer than she expected, but still cold. Silver-touched curtains, a fireplace left unlit, a carved desk stacked with books and ledgers meant to occupy her. As soon as the door closed behind her, Aria collapsed onto the edge of the bed. She hated him, didn't she? She hated his control, his silence, his arrogance, his rejection. But she hated herself more for still feeling the pull, the ache in her bones, the way her wolf stirred in her chest every time he was near. The bond was supposed to be dead. He'd killed it. Why did her heart still feel tethered to his? Days passed. Aria threw herself into work. She studied treaties, attended strategy meetings, sat at long, cold tables beside warriors who looked at her like a broken thing, like she was fragile. But Aria had spent her life in the shadows. She knew how to become invisible. She listened, watched, took notes in silence. And still, he was everywhere. Kael, at every council session, every patrol debriefing. He was all sharp edges and command, never once acknowledging her, but she saw the way his shoulders stiffened when she entered, the way his eyes flicked toward her when he thought she wasn't looking. Their interactions were brief, terse, formal, but tension hung between them like smoke. One afternoon she passed him in the corridor. Their arms brushed. She didn't flinch. But he did. The Bloodfang warriors held a bonfire every full moon, a tradition of strength. Unity. Aria stayed on the outskirts, arms wrapped around herself as laughter and music crackled around the flames. She watched as pack members danced, sparred, drank from flasks laced with herbs. Kael stood across the fire, alone as always, but his eyes were on her. She turned away. Later, as the fire dimmed and warriors returned to their dens, Aria wandered the training grounds alone. The moon cast silver light across the frost. She moved through stances she'd taught herself. Defensive blocks, swift strikes. "You're off balance." She froze. Kael emerged from the shadows, sleeves rolled, eyes unreadable. He stepped into the moonlight. "You drop your shoulder when you pivot. I didn't ask for your opinion." He didn't smile, but something flickered across his face. He stepped behind her, too close, and gently adjusted her arm. "You'll break your wrist like that." His touch burned. Aria yanked her arm away. "Why do you care?" she snapped. "You made it clear I mean nothing." He hesitated. "Then because—" "You're not nothing." The words landed between them like a grenade. Aria stepped back, heart pounding. "You don't get to say that, not after what you did." Kael's jaw tightened. "I didn't reject you, Aria. I rejected the bond. It's the same damn thing." "No," he said, voice low. "It's not." A pause. "Then why?" She whispered. "Why throw it away?" Kael looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time since that night, she saw it. The crack, the regret, the storm beneath the stillness. But he didn't answer. He turned and disappeared into the night. Aria stood in the frost-laced silence, heart shattered all over again. She stared up at the moon and whispered, "I won't let you break me twice." The snowstorm came on the third morning of Aria's second week in the fortress. Thick flakes smothered the world in white, drowning out all sound except the sharp howl of wind battering against stone. The Bloodfang warriors moved with grim precision, sealing windows, reinforcing guard posts. Inside the fortress, tension mounted. War was brewing, not with rogues, but with Westclaw, the border pack whose new alpha had no respect for ancient boundaries. Their patrols had begun creeping into Bloodfang lands, claiming sacred hunting territory and pushing wolves toward desperate retaliation. Kael summoned the War Council. And for the first time, Aria was seated to his right. The chamber was tense, filled with the scent of steel and fury. Warriors, scouts, and diplomats lined the obsidian table that curved like a claw around the fire pit. At the head stood Kael, tall, commanding, his presence a gravity field. To his left, Beta Ronin, grim and growling, with eyes like a wolf fresh from battle. To his right, Aria, quiet, calculating, cloaked in blue wool and silence. She didn't speak unless spoken to, but she noticed everything, the patterns in the border raids, the quiet disappearance of scouts, the way Ronin flinched when Kael mentioned the Crescent Valley, the muscle in Kael's jaw ticking every time Westclaw's name was uttered. Kael pointed at the map. Westclaw is testing our patience. They want to see if we'll bite. And? Ronin growled. Kael's eyes narrowed. I think it's time we showed our teeth. A murmur of assent. But Aria raised a hand. Not yet. Every head turned. Kael arched a brow. Explain. She stood, spine straight, voice calm. They want you to attack. They want you to throw warriors into a trap so they can paint you as the aggressor. Ronin scoffed. And what do you suggest, Omega? She didn't blink. That we outsmart them. We send a peace envoy. You want to negotiate? Ronin spat. I want to win, she said, gaze like ice, without losing 100 warriors in the process. Silence. Then Kael spoke. She's right. The room stilled. Ronin looked betrayed. Kael stepped away from the table. We send a peace envoy. Me and me, Aria added, before she could stop herself. Their eyes locked. A slow, simmering silence stretched between them. Fine, Kael said at last. We leave at dawn. 3 days through blizzard terrain, 2 guards, 1 tent. Aria rode ahead, refusing to let the wind bite into her resolve. She wore leathers lined with night veil silver, a reminder of who she was now. Not the girl who begged Kael to choose her, but the woman who had survived without him. Kael rode beside her in silence. He didn't speak unless necessary. But she felt him watching her. At night when she sharpened her knives by firelight, in the morning when she rose early to study their map. Always watching. On the second night, the wind snapped their tent ropes loose. Aria struggled to hold the canvas against the gale, her fingers going numb. Then, hands, larger, surer, steadying hers. Kael. His touch lingered, not intimate, but not impersonal either. They worked together in silence. Once the tent was up again, she collapsed inside, breathless and cold. He entered after her. There was only one bedroll. He hesitated, then tossed his cloak on the floor. Take it. She narrowed her eyes. I'm not made of glass. I didn't say you were. Then stop acting like you owe me something. I don't. They stared at each other, breathing hard, and in that moment the bond shimmered. Weak, dormant, but not dead. He turned away first. By the time they arrived, Aria's boots were soaked, her fingers cracked from cold, but she held her head high as they entered the Westclaw stronghold, a sleek, modern estate carved from volcanic stone. Warm, too warm. The walls pulsed with heat and the scent of unfamiliar wolves. The new alpha of Westclaw was a smooth-talking wolf named Vex, handsome in a snake-like way. He greeted them with a wide smile and unblinking eyes. Alpha Kael, emissary Aria. Welcome. Kael didn't return the smile. Let's not pretend we're here for pleasantries. Of course, Rylan said silkily, just diplomacy. But Aria noticed the guards, too many, the glint of a poisoned blade on one's hip, the shadows behind the tapestries. Something was off. That night, during dinner, Rylan raised a glass. To alliances, he said. Aria forced a smile. To survival. Afterward, she and Kael were escorted to separate chambers. But hours later, her door creaked open. She reached for her dagger, only to find Kael. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His voice was low. We're being set up. She stood, heart pounding. I knew it. Rylan plans to poison our rations tomorrow. He wants to trigger a war. Aria nodded once. Then we strike first. They fled in silence, cloaks pulled tight, wolves prowling in human skin. They ran through tunnels carved beneath the estate, dodging guards and spells and steel. At one point, Aria tripped. Kael caught her, their faces inches apart. She felt the bond tremble like a storm about to break. I told you, he whispered, voice raw. You're not nothing. She couldn't look away. Then why did you reject me? His hand cupped her cheek. I thought I had to choose between power and love, he said, but I see now. They're not enemies. Her heart cracked. She wanted to scream, cry, throw her arms around him. But she pushed away. We survive first, she said, then we talk. Kael nodded. Together they ran into the night. The gates of Bloodfang Fortress loomed ahead, black stone kissed by frost and firelight, as Aria and Kael returned under the shadow of dawn. Neither spoke, as the great iron bars groaned open. Behind them, the borderland still festered with smoke and betrayal. In their haste, they had left behind bloodless diplomacy and stolen maps, clues they hoped Ronan would read like scripture. But now they brought home something heavier: suspicion, tension, and the kind of silence that only followed close contact between two people who used to be one soul. Ronan stood at the gates waiting, flanked by 10 of the fiercest warriors. His armor gleamed in the morning light, his expression cut from stone. Aria dismounted first, her legs sore from days on horseback, her mind a storm. Ronan didn't even look at her. He went straight to Kael. You were gone 5 days longer than planned, Ronan growled. We thought you'd been taken. Kael handed him a rolled parchment, the stolen evidence from Westclaw. They tried. We got this instead. Ronan's eyes flicked over the document. This proves nothing except that you walked into their den and walked back out. That's when his gaze snapped to Aria. She didn't flinch. Convenient, he said, circling her like a predator. The Omega returns, and suddenly, our Alpha's risking his life for diplomacy, then returns without a scratch. Kael's voice turned sharp. Are you accusing her of treachery? I'm accusing her of being in your head, Ronan snapped. Aria's hand clenched. Kael stepped between them. That's enough. The words dropped like thunder. Every warrior stiffened. Kael turned to her, voice lower, personal. You should rest. No, Aria said, chin up. I want to be at the War Council. He held her gaze, said nothing for a long breath, then nodded once. Hours later, Aria stood in the council chamber again, a fur-lined cloak over her shoulders, her scent clean and sharp with snow and adrenaline. She was no longer just a guest in Bloodfang. She was now a voice in its war. Kael presented the stolen Westclaw map, laying it on the stone table. It marked secret tunnels, entry points carved generations ago, now forgotten. Access routes for sabotage. They're preparing to raid under cover of Alliance, Kael said. This isn't an act of desperation. This is strategy. The room fell silent. One warrior spat into the fire. Then let's strike tonight. No, Aria said. We wait. We smoke them out. Slow, like poison. Make them think we're still blind. Kael nodded. She's right. A pause. Ronan stiffened. You seem to say that a lot lately. Kael didn't respond, but his jaw tensed, and every warrior in the room noticed the glance, the almost imperceptible flicker of Kael's eyes toward Aria, toward the girl he had once rejected, now standing beside him like a queen without a crown. That evening, Aria stood at the North Tower, where the wind sang through broken stone and the world stretched wide beneath the stars. She wore a linen shift and a long wool coat, hair tied back in a warrior's braid. She couldn't sleep, not with the bond thrumming louder every day. She wasn't a fool. She had felt it on the journey, in the shared firelight, in Kael's touch, in the way his breath hitched when her fingers brushed his. And yet, he hadn't said it. He hadn't taken her back. I don't regret rejecting you, he had once said, and she didn't believe him anymore. But she needed to hear the truth. Footsteps approached. She didn't turn. Kael came to stand beside her, cloaked in black. His scent, cedar and frost, filled the space between them. For a while they said nothing. Then he spoke. I knew you'd come here. Is that a threat? She asked dryly. No, he said softly. Just instinct. She turned finally, met his eyes. They were tired, haunted, beautiful. You haven't said it, she whispered. You've danced around it, Kael. The bond is still there. You feel it too. He didn't deny it. I thought I could cut it, he said, voice raw. I thought I had to, that if I didn't reject you, I'd lose control of myself, of the pack. I was afraid. She stepped closer. What changed? He looked at her like she was fire and salvation and punishment all at once. You did. She blinked. I expected the girl I left behind, he continued, the one who cried when I walked away. But you came back sharper, stronger, And now I see, rejecting you didn't kill the bond, it only made it ache. Her throat tightened. He took one step closer, close enough that his breath warmed her cheek. But I won't claim you, he said. Not yet. Her heart shattered. Why? She choked. Because you deserve to choose, he said. This time, you're not a weak link in the chain. You're not the girl who needed me. You're the woman who could walk away. She stepped back, stunned, and he let her. The next morning, Aria was at the training circle before sunrise. She fought like a storm, sparring with warriors twice her size, blades in both hands, eyes sharp. She moved like fury sculpted in flesh. By the time Kael came to find her, she had knocked 3 wolves flat. He stood watching from the edge, arms crossed, as she disarmed another with a flick of her wrist. I need you at the war table again, he said when she finally approached. Not your pawn, she replied, breathless. No, he said. My equal. The words settled between them like thunder. The fortress buzzed with energy, not joy, not triumph, but something tense and electric, like the pack was holding its collective breath. The council had gone quiet after Aria's inclusion, but silence didn't mean peace. It meant planning, whispering, watching. Aria had lived among wolves long enough to know danger didn't always howl. Sometimes it smiled. 2 days after the council meeting, Aria walked through the training yard with sweat at her temples and bruises blooming like paint on her ribs. She welcomed the pain. It grounded her. But it didn't stop the voices. She shouldn't be here. I heard the Alpha watches her train. He rejected her. Why is she still around? She must be using the bond. She's nothing. Just a pretty Omega with a bite. Their whispers weren't even subtle anymore. Aria didn't flinch. She kept walking, each step a reminder that she'd earned the right to stand here. Not through a bond, not through Kael, but through blood and fire and grit. Still, it stung, not the gossip. But that Kael hadn't silenced them. That afternoon, it came to a head. Kael was overseeing the strategy review in the war hall when the heavy wooden doors slammed open and Elias, a seasoned warrior with a scar down his cheek and a grudge older than most grudges, walked in. I challenge her. Kael looked up from the table. What? I challenge the Omega, Elias repeated. To prove she belongs here. She doesn't. We all know it. The room stilled. Eyes turned to Aria. She stood near the maps, fingers clenched. Ronan smirked from the corner, arms folded. Of course he'd support this. Kael's voice dropped. You want to fight her? Not to the death, Elias said, pretending civility. Just until she yields, let the pack see what she's really made of. Kael's jaw flexed. He didn't look at Aria. She stepped forward before he could speak. I accept. Gasps rippled. Kael turned toward her sharply. Aria, I said I accept, she cut in. Unless the Alpha thinks I'm too fragile? Their eyes locked. Something cracked between them. Not broken, just exposed. Kael looked at Elias. She accepts. You touch her the wrong way and I'll break your spine. By sunset, the arena was packed. Warriors stood shoulder to shoulder, mouths tight, arms crossed. The fire pits glowed as the sun dipped behind the snow-dusted trees. Aria stood barefoot in the center, hair braided tight, wearing a black leather tunic over simple training pants. She rolled her shoulders, stretching cold muscles. Across from her, Elias stood like a mountain, smug, older, bulkier. He thought this would be easy. He didn't understand the storm he'd invited. The horn blew. Elias charged, fast for his size. Claws out, a flash of metal in his right hand. Aria ducked, twisted, and sliced at his leg with her short dagger. The blade bit skin. He grunted. The crowd roared. She stayed low, weaving, letting him burn energy while she played shadow. Her feet skimmed dirt. Her breathing was steady. This wasn't about rage. It was about proving that she was more than a cast-off. More than a rejected mate. More than Kael's former. Elias caught her arm once, twisting it hard, but she rolled with the torque, used the momentum to slam her elbow into his ribs. He staggered. Then she flipped him. The crowd exploded. Even Kael's mouth parted. Elias lay on his back, coughing. Aria pressed a blade to his throat. Yield, he snarled. The edge bit skin. Yield. Silence. Then, I yield. She stood, stepping back, and the entire pack was forced to see her not as the Omega who was left behind, but the Omega who never needed saving. She showered in silence, scrubbing away dirt and blood, steam fogging the mirrors in the stone bathhouse. Her ribs ached, her muscles trembled. But her soul? Her soul felt unbreakable, until the door creaked. She froze, towel around her chest. Kael stepped inside, not looking away. He was still dressed in black, cloak dusted with snow. His eyes burned. "You could have died." She stared at him. "But I didn't. I should have stopped it." "Then why didn't you?" He was silent. "Because you knew I'd win," she said, softer now. "Just like I know you saw me as more than your cast-off that day. Just like I know you wanted me to prove something, not to them, to you." Kael didn't move. Then, slowly, he crossed the stone floor. He stopped just in front of her, so close her towel trembled from his breath. "Your scent," he said hoarsely. "It drives me mad." Her throat tightened. "I rejected you to protect the pack," he murmured. "But now I can't tell if I'm protecting them, or punishing myself." Her hand lifted, almost touched his chest, then dropped. "I don't want your guilt," she said. "I want your truth." A pause. Kael stepped back, and left. The next morning the fortress felt different. The warriors nodded as she passed. Ronan avoided her eyes. Even Elias bowed his head once. But Kael? He kept his distance, watching from afar, torn between instincts and duty. And Aria trained harder. She studied maps late into the night. She walked through the snow like a ghost set on fire. Because now she knew something dangerous. The bond wasn't just alive, it was burning. And one day, it would either consume them or remake them. Snow fell in soft, lazy spirals outside the fortress, blanketing the trees in silence. But the stillness was a lie. Trouble had come. By morning, 3 border scouts were dead. Kael stood at the war table, jaw clenched so tightly his molars throbbed. The scout's body had been torn open at the chest, ribs snapped like twigs, blood soaked into the snow. Not by a rogue, the wounds were too clean, too deliberate. This was a message. Beside him, Beta Callan scowled. "That's 3 this week, 2 from the Western Patrol, now this. They're probing." Kael nodded once. "Rogues?" Ronan asked from the shadows. "No?" Kael pointed to the gouges on the map, burned in by a red-hot blade. "This mark belongs to the Vargash pack." Callan's eyes narrowed. They were supposed to be neutral. "Neutrality's a myth," Kael said quietly, "especially when power changes hands." Later that morning, Aria stood in the tactical chamber, scanning the border layout. Snow melted on her shoulders from her patrol run, dampening the sleeve of her tunic. "You're up early," Callan said, raising a brow. She looked up. "The cold clears my head." He handed her a piece of parchment, the spy's report. Her eyes skimmed the runes etched into the edge. Her expression tightened. "They're not just probing," she said after a moment. "They're cataloging our weaknesses. And they're doing it with someone on the inside." Callan's brows lifted. "You're sure?" She pointed to the rhythm of the movements. "They're choosing patrols that shift at irregular intervals. Someone's feeding them the change logs." Kael stepped into the room just then, catching the tail end. His eyes flicked to Aria. "You think there's a traitor?" "I think," she said. "You've got a viper in your den, Alpha." By midday, Kael summoned her into the strategy room, alone. A low fire crackled behind him, casting shadows on the stone walls. He stood with his back to her, staring at the map of the territory. "I want you to lead a scouting party," he said without turning. "West Quadrant, small team. Just enough to see how close Vargash has come." Aria blinked. "You want me to lead?" "I want eyes I trust," he said. "And no one's watching you closely enough to suspect your moves." She stepped forward. "You're using my outsider status." "I'm using your strength," he said, finally facing her. "Don't confuse the two." Something flickered in his eyes. Admiration, perhaps, or something older, something tethered to a bond they refused to name. "I want you on the move before dusk," he added. "No backup, no noise." She nodded slowly. "And what happens if I don't come back?" His voice dropped. "You come back." They moved through the forest like shadows. Aria, Jace, a wiry archer, Lyra, a stone-faced tracker, and an Omega named Mara, small but deceptively fast. By moonrise, the woods were too quiet. That's when they found it. A bloodless kill. Not a wolf, a deer, hung upside down from a tree, carved with the same symbol Kael had shown on the map. A message. Behind her, Lyra knelt to sniff the ground. Too fresh. Whoever did this is close. Aria's heart raced. Then, a whistle. Sharp. Human. They were being herded. "Move!" Aria barked. But it was too late. Figures burst from the trees, 4, maybe 5, in black cloaks, blades gleaming, eyes wild with something dark and unholy. Not rogues. Not Vargash. Hunters. And they weren't there to take prisoners. Aria ducked a blade and swept Mara behind her, spinning to face 2 of the attackers. Jace loosed an arrow that thunked into a throat, but one of the hunters surged forward with an unnatural growl. They weren't human, or if they were, they weren't anymore. Aria's claws ripped free, her body pulsing with the half-shift. She wasn't full wolf, but her muscles elongated, eyes glowing with silver. She kicked out, caught one in the jaw, and turned just as another came for her side. Blood, snow, screams. Mara went down with a cry, and Aria lunged to cover her. A blade sliced her forearm, burning, and she rolled over, trapping the hunter between her knees. She drove her dagger through his throat. Then, a howl, not theirs. Kael. Seconds later, the trees shook. The alpha tore into the clearing in full wolf form, massive, obsidian-furred, fangs bared. The very earth seemed to tremble as he collided with one of the attackers, crushing the man beneath his weight. Another lunged at him but was swatted aside like a doll. Within minutes it was over. The last hunter fell gurgling into the snow. Kael shifted back, bare-chested, blood-streaked, eyes locked on Aria. "And you were supposed to wait for my return," she rasped. "Oh, when you were bleeding," he growled. "And I felt it." They limped back to the fortress under the heavy press of night. Aria's arm was wrapped tight with cloth, Kael refusing to let anyone else bind her wounds. He didn't speak, not until they reached her room. Then he did. "Oh, you nearly died." "Hunt, you said that last time." He stepped closer. "You're reckless. You're obsessed." They were nose to nose now. She could feel his breath on her lips. His scent was all-consuming. Earth, frost, pine, musk. His wolf, restless, paced beneath his skin. "Ain't Aria?" His voice broke. "And I can't keep rejecting you." She froze. He leaned in, forehead against hers. His touch trembled. "I want to fight it. But every time I see you hurt, something in me breaks. You were supposed to be my weakness, but you've become my anchor." Her lips parted, but no words came. He pulled back, but only slightly, enough for her to see the war still raging in his eyes. "I'll protect you," he said. "I never needed protection," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "But I'll take your loyalty." Snow had fallen hard through the night, but the real blizzard brewed within the stone walls of the Crescent Moon Fortress. The Alpha's command had been challenged. The she-wolf he rejected, the one they called Outsider, had survived an ambush, killed 3 of the enemy with her own hands, and returned with half her team intact when no one expected her to return at all. And now, the pack couldn't stop whispering her name. Aria. The girl who wouldn't die. The girl the Alpha saved with a bloodthirst in his eyes no one had seen since his father was murdered. The girl who should never have been his mate. The moon was high when the Council of Elders convened, cloaks dragging over polished stone, eyes like polished glass beads watching Kael as he strode into the circular chamber with the weight of expectation anchoring his shoulders. Elder Ronan stood at the center, his silver hair tied back, scars from the last great pack war still visible on his throat. His gaze was cool. "She risked the Alpha bloodline to save a patrol, Kael," he said, tone clipped, "and one of whom is your rejected mate. A she-wolf without rank, without lineage." Kael didn't flinch. She had more success against the threat than 3 of our elite scouts," he replied evenly. "And she discovered what you missed. There's a traitor among us." Ronan's nostrils flared. "Bold words, Alpha. Based on the guesses of a half-feral rogue with a bloodied knife? Sanai watched that rogue take down a creature enhanced with dark magic. She bled for this pack. Can you say the same?" A low murmur ran through the circle. Some of the elders exchanged looks, others remained impassive, but Kael saw the slight twitch of their jaws. He was pressing lines, and they didn't like it. "She is dangerous," Elder Mora hissed, eyes narrow. "You may be too young to see it, Kael, but I've seen she-wolves like her rise and bring empires to ruin. There's ambition beneath that humility, and power unchecked is— Power ignored is more dangerous," Kael cut in, voice cold steel. and I will not sit idle while my pack bleeds at the hands of an invisible enemy." There was a pause. Then Ronan spoke again, voice gentler, but no less lethal. "Then let her prove her loyalty, Alpha. Let her take the oath of service." Kael stilled. "You mean the blood oath?" "It's tradition," Mora said. "It's a curse," Kael growled, "one that binds her will to me, makes her less than wolf." "Or proves her worth," Ronan said with a shrug. "If she's what you claim, she'll pass the trial with her spirit intact. If not, then she was never meant to stay." Kael knew what this was. A trap disguised as diplomacy. If Aria refused, they'd say she was hiding something. If she accepted, she'd be forced to kneel before them, swear her body, her voice and her claws to the service of the Alpha who rejected her. They were giving her two poisoned choices, and Kael had no idea which one she'd take. The knock on her chamber door came before sunrise. She wasn't asleep. Sleep had become a rare gift since the ambush. Kael stepped inside, dressed in black, hair damp from a shower. His jaw was tight. He didn't speak for a long time. "They want me to take the blood oath," she said before he could. His head snapped up. "How did you—" "I'm not deaf, Kael, and I'm not stupid." He exhaled and leaned against the edge of her desk. "You don't have to do it. I'll refuse. I'll challenge them if I have to." She stood, crossing to face him. "You're the Alpha. Refusing them will cost you. You know that." "I don't care. You should." Her eyes met his, clear, steady, unyielding. "I'll take it," she said. Kael's breath hitched. "Aria, I've fought alone since I was 12. I can survive a ceremony designed to tame me. They think I'll break. But I won't. And you know it." He looked at her like she was fire. Like she was made of something rare and burning and impossible. "You don't have to prove anything to me. I'm not doing it for you." He nodded once. But she saw it, the flicker of hurt buried behind his pride, the way his fists clenched as if he wanted to reach for her and couldn't. Or wouldn't. Not yet. The Hall of Binding hadn't been used in decades. Carved deep beneath the fortress, it was lit only by torches and old magic. Symbols were scorched into the stone, vows, promises, betrayals. Kael stood at the center in formal Alpha garb, the silver of his family crest gleaming against the black leather across his chest. Aria walked in, hair braided back, wearing nothing ceremonial, just the tunic she wore when she fought. The elders stood in a circle, murmuring incantations in the old tongue. A ceremonial blade was dipped in wolfsbane, then passed to Kael. "Repeat after me," Ronan intoned. Kael's voice was tight. "I, Alpha Kael of Crescent Moon, call forth the vow of loyalty from she-wolf Aria of no clan." Aria stepped into the circle. "I, Aria of no clan," she said clearly, "accept the bond, and the fire it brings." Kael sliced his palm first, then hers. Blood dripped onto the rune-marked stone. The floor shimmered, pulsed. Magic caught like breath between them. Kael's lips moved. "Do you submit your will to the Alpha?" Silence. Aria met his gaze, not defiantly, but fully. "I submit to the pack, but not to you." A collective gasp filled the chamber. Then the runes flared. Gold and white. Not red, not black, not submission, balance. The bond formed, but not as they expected. The magic merged with her, but it didn't chain her. It welcomed her, claimed her not as property, but as protector. The elders stared, stunned. Kael swallowed hard, eyes locked on her. "She didn't break," Ronan whispered. "She reformed the bond." Kael's voice was a low whisper, full of awe. She bent the magic to her will, and somewhere inside his chest, his wolf howled. Not for war, not for power. But for her. Later that night, he found her on the tower roof, moonlight soaking her face, snow gathering at her boots. "You changed the oath," he said. "No," she replied, not looking at him. "It changed for me." Silence stretched between them. "Why?" he asked. "Why accept it at all?" She turned. "Because this isn't about us anymore, Kael. This is about something bigger. There's a darkness coming, one you won't beat with strength alone. You need people who won't kneel, who won't bow, who'll stand when everyone else breaks." Kael stepped closer. "And you think you're one of them?" She tilted her head. "I know I am." He didn't touch her, not yet. But his voice dropped. "If I asked you not to fight, to stay here where it's safe, would you listen? No, even if I begged." Her eyes searched his, especially then. Kael smiled. It was small, bitter, admiring. "You're going to be the death of me, or the reason you live." They didn't kiss. They didn't touch, but the air between them burned hotter than flame. And both of them knew nothing would ever be the same again. The snow had melted from the rooftops by morning, but the cold between Aria and the Crescent Moon Council hadn't thawed. Not after what they'd seen the night before. No one had ever bent the blood oath before. It had been designed as a magical leash, a way to bind loyalty through the dominance of the Alpha. It had never, in the long recorded history of Crescent Moon, been shared. But Aria hadn't been broken. She hadn't even wavered. Now she walked through the fortress halls not as the forgotten outsider, but as something else, something unpredictable, something the council feared, and something Kael couldn't stop thinking about. It was barely dawn when Kael called his top warriors into the war room, a circular chamber lit by torches and marked with old maps, hand-drawn charts of the Crescent Moon territory, and recent sketches of mangled bodies recovered from the northern border. A creature had been hunting them, not feral, sentient, intelligent, precise, leaving survivors to carry messages in blood. "Look at the claw marks," Aria murmured as she traced her fingers over the drawings of the wounds. "They're curved inward, not outward. This isn't some wild beast. This is someone trained to extract pain, not just kill." "Like a torturer," rumbled Garen, the beta, his arms crossed. "No," Aria said. "Like a message." Kael watched her, arms folded behind his back, his expression unreadable. The council wanted her kept within the fortress walls. Watched. They didn't trust her rising influence among the soldiers. But Kael knew the truth. She saw things others didn't. Felt things before they struck. She was their best chance of stopping whatever was coming. He just hadn't realized how hard it would be to watch her walk into it. "You'll lead a squad north," Kael said finally. "To the edge of the Black Hollow Forest. There's a village there that's gone dark. No messengers in 4 days. No trade caravans. And the last scout we sent turned up dismembered." Aria didn't flinch. "Who's coming with me?" Kael turned to the others. "I want Garen, Elira, and Fen with her." Garen stiffened. "You want your beta to leave your side?" Kael didn't blink. "I trust her more than I trust half the wolves in this fortress." Garen didn't reply. Aria met Kael's eyes but said nothing. Not "thank you," not "you'll regret this," just silence. The kind that carried weight between warriors. The kind that meant everything. She changed alone, suiting up in black leather armor padded for movement, not for protection. Wolves didn't need to be shielded, they needed to be fast. When she emerged into the courtyard, Fen was sharpening his blade, Elira braiding her snow-white hair, and Garen watching her. "You really think you can lead us?" he asked without malice, just cold scrutiny. "I'm not here to lead you," Aria replied. "I'm here to survive. What you do with that is up to you." He huffed a breath of approval. Good answer. Kael arrived last. He crossed the snow-covered stones without a word, eyes locked on Aria as if he were memorizing the way the frost clung to her boots, the way her braid swung low against her back. "You don't have to go," he said quietly. She turned, lips twitching into a half-smile. "You keep saying that, but I'm not waiting to be caged again, Kael, not even by you." His jaw clenched. "I don't want to cage you." "Then stop trying to protect me from myself." They stared at each other for a beat too long. Then she stepped away, shifting into her wolf form mid-leap, fur the color of storm clouds, eyes glowing gold, and sprinted for the tree line. The others followed. Kael stood alone in the courtyard, and his wolf, restless beneath his skin, howled. The deeper they traveled into the northern woodlands, the quieter it became. No birdsong, no rustling prey. Even the wind seemed to avoid the thickened trees. It was Fen who spoke first. "This place feels wrong." Elira nodded, like something old is watching. Garen didn't speak. But Aria saw the way his hand lingered at the dagger on his belt, his nose twitching. She shifted back into human form and crouched by a tree with blood on its bark. "This isn't fresh," she murmured. 2 days, maybe 3. No body. She touched the ground, sniffed the earth. Too clean. Someone removed the bodies. "To hide them?" Elira asked. "To send a message," Aria replied. She rose to her feet, eyes scanning the trees. "We're being herded, not chased, not stalked, guided." "Guided where?" Fen asked. Aria pointed. "To the village." By nightfall, they found it. The village of Hallowmere, or what was left of it. Smoke rose from burned homes, blood stained the snow, but no bodies, not a single corpse. Aria gagged behind her scarf. Fang sniffed the air and growled. Garen crouched low, eyes narrowed. Too clean. Exactly, Aria said. This was done by someone who wanted us to see it, and smell it. Then where are the villagers? Garen growled. Aria walked forward, following the smell of ash and blood, until she saw the sign. A crude carving nailed to the tree at the village center. One wolf's betrayal will break the pack. Underneath it, a brand, not of any clan they knew, but one Aria had seen before, in her dreams. The symbol burned like coal into her memory, a jagged crescent split by a dagger. She turned to the others. We need to get back. Why? Aria asked, but Garen had already figured it out. Because the traitor isn't out here. Aria nodded, her pulse pounding. He's already inside the fortress. Back at the fortress, Kael stood before the council that night, arguing for increased defenses, restructured scouting routes, and the rapid translation of the ancient texts recovered from the southern ruins. The council was unconvinced, and they've always been cautious, he said aloud. And now I think they're stalling. Twy? Asked his new advisor, a younger wolf named Corin. Kael's mouth tightened. And because something's coming. And I don't think they want to stop it. I think they want it to come. The night air bit with a quiet ferocity as Aria, Garen, Illyra, and Fang sprinted through the snow-draped forest, racing toward Crescent Moon territory. Their breath came in clouds, legs pounding against frozen earth, every instinct screaming faster. What they had seen in Hallowmere was not just a massacre. It was a message, one not sent to frighten, but to lure. To divide, to twist trust into paranoia. And Aria knew who it was meant for. Kael, the Alpha, the one they wanted distracted, or worse, deceived. The fortress came into view just as dawn streaked the sky in hues of amber and frost. Guards at the main gate howled upon recognizing them, the heavy iron gates creaking open with urgency. Garen shifted first, his voice rough in his human throat. We need to speak to Kael, now. Illyra followed, bleeding from her thigh. We were watched the entire time. No doubt, we left no trace, but they knew we were coming. Fang dropped his shift last, eyes wide and hollow. They're playing with us. Aria was the last to change, her wolf reluctant to relinquish control. When she rose, her skin steamed against the cold, eyes glowing faintly as she stepped across the threshold. The moment she entered, the air inside the fortress changed. Wariness slithered through the halls like smoke. Servants averted their eyes, guards gripped weapons tighter. And members of the council, watching from the upper balconies, whispered behind sleeved robes. She wasn't just a rogue anymore. She was becoming something else. Kael stood over the war table, his gaze fixed on a map of the surrounding territories. Lines were drawn in blood-red ink, recent attacks, disappearances, and now, a complete village wiped out. He didn't look up as the door swung open and Garen stepped in, flanked by Aria and the others. What did you see? Kael asked, still staring at the map. Aria stepped forward. Not what? Who? That made him raise his head. She reached into her cloak and pulled out the wooden sign, the one nailed to the tree in Hallowmere, wrapped carefully in wolfhide. She unrolled it on the table. One wolf's betrayal will break the pack, and underneath it, the crude sigil carved into the wood. Kael's blood went cold. Not because he recognized the symbol, but because he didn't. By midday, the council had been gathered. 12 of the most powerful wolves in the pack, old, proud, and cautious. They sat around the obsidian table like kings carved from iron, their expressions stoic and veiled. The wooden sign sat in the center, dark with dried blood and meaning. It's a threat, Garen said, directed at us. At our pack. Possibly at you, Alpha, or, sneered Lord Vyrex, one of the oldest councilmen, it is a manipulation. Meant to divide us. Cause fear. Exactly what you're allowing that female to do, Kael. Aria didn't flinch. She stood just behind Kael's right shoulder, silent but alert, every word from Vyrex's mouth drawing her gaze like a knife to a throat. I trust Aria, Kael said calmly. You shouldn't, another council member muttered. She hasn't earned. She's risked her life while the rest of you sit in velvet chairs and spin theories. Kael snapped, his voice suddenly sharp. Aria's breath caught. It was the first time he had publicly defended her, and it was the first time she realized how much that would cost him. Later that night, Kael summoned Aria to his private chamber, not for comfort, not for warmth, but because he'd made a decision. "I think the council is hiding something," he said, pacing the room like a caged wolf. "There's an entire wing of the archives they've kept sealed for decades. Even I can't access it." Aria, drying her hair by the fire, looked up. "You're the alpha." Kael turned, eyes locking with hers. "Which makes me the most dangerous man to them. If I uncover a truth that threatens their power, they'll act." Aria stood, the firelight painting her skin in gold. "Then let me be the weapon." He stared at her, so calm, so certain, so unshakable. But beneath her strength, he saw the fatigue, the weight of always being outside, always fighting. He crossed the room slowly. "You're more than a weapon, Aria." His voice had changed, quieter now. She turned, searching his face. "Then, what am I?" Kael was silent for a moment. Then, just as he opened his mouth, a knock shattered the stillness. Garen's voice came through the door. "We found something." The archives were carved deep into the mountain beneath the fortress. Torchlight flickered along the old stone walls, shadows dancing like memories long buried. Kael, Aria, Garen, and Fang descended the narrow staircase, led by a young scout who had overheard whispers among the scribes. "Here," the scout said, stopping before a sealed door, bound in runes and silver locks. "What is this?" Aria asked, touching the glyphs. Kael frowned. "It's ancient crescent moon script, from before the territory wars." With a growl, Garen smashed the lock. The door creaked open with a hiss of stale air and secrets. Inside, dozens of scrolls, maps, names. But it was Aria who found the sealed, leather-bound ledger. She opened it carefully, and there, on the first page, was the symbol from Hallowmere, and under it, one word, Vyrex. "Vyrex?" Fang asked, confused. Kael went pale. "That's not a name, that's a death order." Everyone stared at him. He took the book from Aria and flipped through rapidly. During the earliest wars, the Vyrex were an underground rebellion, wolves who believed in merging bloodlines with humans, magical experimentation, hybrids, witches, Garen muttered. "Abominations." "No," Kael whispered. "They called them ascendants. They believed in creating wolves who could manipulate not just the body, but the mind." Aria felt her blood run cold. Why was this hidden? Kael looked up, something burning behind his eyes. Because the Crescent Moon Council slaughtered them. Every man, woman, and child. They buried the truth and erased the name from history. The room was silent, until Aria whispered, barely audible, "Then why do I remember it?" The discovery of the Vyrex ledger cracked open a truth too ancient and too dangerous for comfort. In the days following their descent into the forbidden archives, Kael moved with careful precision, as though the ground beneath him could collapse at any moment. The council grew restless. Rumors slithered through the fortress like snakes in tall grass. And Aria? She was unraveling. Not because she was afraid of the Vyrex, but because something inside her whispered, "You are one of them." The night after the discovery, Aria woke screaming. Her room, a small stone chamber just off the barracks, was dim. The fire had burned low, casting strange shadows along the walls. She sat up, her body drenched in sweat, her chest heaving. But the dream hadn't felt like a dream. It felt like a memory, a hand, cold and firm, gripping her by the wrist, a voice chanting in a tongue not her own blood levitating from her skin like smoke. She staggered out of bed and stumbled to the basin, splashing her face with water. When she looked up, her reflection was blurred, warped. Her irises glowed faintly in the dark, swirling with something that was not entirely wolf. And she whispered to the flickering mirror, "What am I?" Kael found her on the northern ramparts that night, sitting alone with her knees pulled to her chest, staring out across the snow-covered forest. He didn't announce himself. He didn't need to. She sensed him in her bones now. "I saw it," she said, without looking at him. The experiments, the screaming. Children locked in cages while wolves dissected them to see how the blood reacted to iron, to magic. He stood silently beside her, arms crossed over his chest. "They weren't monsters, Kael. They were made monsters. Just like me." He turned his head, brows drawn low. "You're not a monster." She finally looked at him. Her voice shook. "Then why do I feel like I could kill a man with a thought?" Silence. A long, pregnant pause. Then Kael did something unexpected. He sat beside her. Close. So close her body tensed with heat and ache. But not desire. Not yet. It was comfort. Strength. "I've been taught that power is dangerous," he said. "That too much of it in one body leads to madness. But watching you, I'm starting to think that's what they wanted us to believe, so no one would ever rise." She looked at him. Really looked. For the first time, Kael wasn't just a powerful alpha. He was a man questioning everything. His bloodline. His legacy. His choices. And Aria could feel something pulling tight between them, like a string wound through both of their rib cages, drawing them closer. Quietly. Painfully. At dawn, Aria was summoned. Not by Kael, by the council. 2 guards escorted her down into the council chamber, a dome of black stone and stained glass where sunlight filtered through like judgment. 12 counselors stood like sentinels, hoods drawn, eyes hard. Lord Vyrex stepped forward. "Aria Stone," he began, voice as cold as mountain frost. "You are hereby accused of treason, manipulation of forbidden magic, and deceit against the Crescent Moon Pack." Her fists clenched. "On what grounds?" Vyrex slammed the Vyrex ledger down onto the obsidian altar. "You knew of this. You've accessed knowledge forbidden for a reason. You are Vyrex born. You are a threat." A murmur passed through the circle. Aria felt heat pulse behind her eyes. "I am not your enemy. But you will become one," Vyrex hissed, "unless you are contained." Before she could react, chains laced with silver shot from the altar, snaking up her legs, arms, torso. They burned instantly, drawing smoke from her skin. She screamed. Not in pain. In fury? The moment Kael heard her scream from the upper chambers, his wolf surged. He shifted mid-run, tearing down the corridor and slamming into the council chamber like a storm. The sight of Aria, bound, restrained, glowing with ancient magic, stopped his heart. "Unbind her," he roared, his voice reverberating through the chamber like thunder. Lord Vyrex lifted his chin, calm and unaffected. "She is Vyrex. She is not safe." Kael lunged. He didn't just punch the counselor. He shifted mid-air, claws slashing across the man's chest, sending him crashing into a pillar with bone-snapping force. The room erupted into chaos, but Kael stood at the center, breathing hard, teeth bared. "Touch her again," he growled, "and I'll rip every one of your tongues from your skulls." He ripped the chains from Aria's skin even as they burned his hands. She collapsed into him, breathing hard, barely conscious, and in front of the entire council he lifted her into his arms and walked away. Unapologetic, unshaken, unleashed. Back in Kael's chambers, he laid her gently on his bed. His hands trembled as he cleaned her burns, working in silence. She watched him, her voice raw. "Why did you come?" His hands paused. "I didn't come for you," he said, voice low. "I was already on my way." That silence again. He wrung out the cloth, watching the blood swirl in the bowl beside the bed. Then, without thinking, without planning, he brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, and his thumb lingered. Her eyes fluttered shut. She leaned into the touch like a moth to flame. "I've wanted to touch you like this," he said, "for days." Aria opened her eyes. "But you didn't. Because I'm not your mate," he whispered, "and if I cross that line, I won't be able to go back." She reached up, her fingers barely grazing his. "What if I don't want you to go back?" Their foreheads touched, not a kiss. Not yet. But something deeper. A promise, forged in fire and blood and quiet rebellion. The moon hung low and red that night, an omen of unrest in the supernatural world, a silent scream painted across the sky. Aria hadn't slept. Not truly. She had lain in Kael's bed, not as a lover, but as a fugitive cradled in safety. The memory of silver binding her wrists and ankles replayed in her mind with cruel detail. Her skin still bore the raw lines. Her soul, worse, was scored with betrayal. But what haunted her most wasn't the council's hatred. It was how close she had come to giving in to the voice inside her, the one that begged her to burn them all. Unbeknownst to Kael, while he tended to Aria, the council reconvened, this time without him. 12 seats, 12 cowards, all dressed in wolf-bone cloaks. Vyrex stood in the center of the circle, His ribs were bandaged from Kael's earlier assault, but his voice remained unshaken. "C is Vyrex, that much is clear." Her blood glows in darkness. Her scream shook the castle stone, and you all saw what happened when Kael touched her. Her aura flared. It reacted. "You think this is a mating bond?" He laughed, dark and humorless. "No, this is possession." He looked at each member, one by one, and we cannot kill her outright. Not yet. But if Kael is too blind to see her for what she truly is, then we must remove the temptation. A vote was called, 7-5. The order passed in secret, and the command was given to a man whose loyalty could not be questioned. Kael's own cousin, Dren was nothing like Kael. Where the alpha was fire and gravity, Dren was a ghost in the snow. A man who walked like silence, spoke like steel, and obeyed without question. His wolf was lean and colorless, like ash. His bite, lethal. He didn't like the task, but he accepted it. Non-lethal, Vyrex had instructed. Bring her in, alive, contained. He didn't ask why the council's newest obsession needed to be handled like prey. He didn't ask why they feared her. Dren never asked questions. He only followed blood trails. While the council plotted, Kael remained by Aria's side. He hadn't shifted in days, not since the council chamber. His wolf itched beneath his skin, agitated, cornered. But he couldn't give in. Not while she was so fragile. That morning she finally sat up. "You haven't left." He looked up from his chair beside the hearth. "You were injured." "Still," she said, "an alpha shouldn't babysit." He chuckled. "You've clearly never met an alpha with regrets." Aria tilted her head. "What do you regret?" He met her eyes, and this time he didn't look away. "Rejecting you." The words fell heavy, sincere, brutal. Her breath caught. "Kael, I didn't know then," he said, voice low. "That fate could be wrong. That bonds can form from choice, not just magic. But you," he swallowed, "you make me want things I've buried for years." The air between them thickened, and then her hand reached out. Not a kiss, not an embrace. Just a single touch, her fingers curling around his. "Then let's stop running from it," she whispered. That night, Kael left her briefly, to meet with his lieutenants and stall the rising tensions with the pack. Aria, now stronger, wandered the outer edge of the training grounds. Snow fell in gentle spirals, painting her dark cloak white. She didn't sense Dren's approach until it was too late. The first thing she felt was the sting of a tranquilizer dart in her neck. She staggered, vision blurring. Then came the second dart, this one with a paralytic agent that dulled her limbs like lead, and then he appeared. A shadow walking out of the trees, 6'5", silver eyes, no emotion. "Sorry," Dren said, lifting her into his arms. "It's not personal." Kael sensed it before he was told. His wolf flared inside him, howling, clawing, screaming. He burst from the war room mid-sentence, shirtless, already shifting mid-run. Snow exploded beneath his paws. He followed the scent, hers, laced with iron and poison. And beneath it, Dren, his own kin, his own blood. The betrayal made his vision go red. Kael found them halfway down the western slope, near the edge of the forest. Dren had laid Aria gently on a stone slab, checking her pulse, preparing her for transport. He hadn't expected company so soon. Kael didn't wait for words. He attacked. The two wolves collided like titans, teeth, claws, roars that sent birds fleeing into the sky. Snow churned with blood and fury. Dren was fast, precise. But Kael was possessed, with rage, with grief, with love. "I trusted you," Kael roared mid-shift, grappling him into the ground. "She's dangerous," Dren choked, spitting blood. "I don't care." And that was when Dren hesitated. Because for the first time, Kael chose a woman over the pack, over family, over everything. Kael didn't kill Dren, but he left him broken. He carried Aria back in the storm, holding her against his bare chest, whispering to her, even though she couldn't hear him, "I'll never let them touch you again." Back in the safety of his chamber, he cleaned her wounds, stayed by her side until her eyes finally fluttered open. "I knew you'd come," she rasped. He leaned in, pressing his forehead to hers. "I'll always come." And that night, for the first time, they didn't just hold hands or steal glances. They slept in the same bed, limbs tangled, breathing as one. Not as mates, not yet. But as something stronger, two souls choosing one another in defiance of fate. The snow had finally stopped falling, but the chill left behind seemed to settle in Aria's bones. She awoke slowly, painfully, consciousness returning like a reluctant tide. Each breath felt heavier than the last, but it wasn't the poison or pain that made her chest ache. It was the way Kael was looking at her, as if she'd almost slipped from his hands and he was still trying to believe she was here, safe, breathing. "You're awake," he murmured, his voice cracked from sleepless hours. "Thank the gods." His thumb gently grazed her cheekbone. She blinked, confused, disoriented, and more aware than ever that she had almost been taken. Again, "Dren," she whispered, the name thick on her tongue like ash. "He shot me." Kael nodded slowly. "He was following orders from the council. I stopped him, but not before he laid his hands on you." The way he said it, "his hands on you," made her heart pound for a different reason. It wasn't just protectiveness. It was possession. A barely contained fury laced with something darker, deeper. She looked at Kael, saw the torn knuckles, the drying blood beneath his fingernails, the twitch in his jaw when he tried to stay calm. "I wanted to kill him," he said simply. "I didn't. But I wanted to." She reached for him then, fingertips trembling. And for once, he didn't hesitate. He took her hand and brought it to his lips. She slept again. But this time, she dreamed, not of fire or cages, but of him, of being in his arms, skin to skin, not in desperation, but in choice. She dreamed of Kael pressing his forehead against hers, whispering things in a language her heart understood before her mind did. She awoke in the middle of the night, skin damp with sweat, the bond inside her pulsing like a silent drum. She needed air. She needed answers. Wrapped in a cloak, she stepped out into the bitter wind. Snow crackled underfoot. The moon was distant, veiled behind fast-moving clouds. She walked to the edge of the training ground, to the place where Dren had nearly taken her. Her heartbeat was off, her senses sharper than usual, and then it started again, the burning, a ripple beneath her skin, as though something within her had been unlocked. Not the primal wolf her kind were born with, but something older, something not meant for control. She looked down and saw her fingertips glowing, faintly, like embers waiting to ignite. "What are you?" she whispered. But a voice behind her answered. "More than they understand. More than they'll ever allow." Kael. Of course. He stepped into view, shirtless, barefoot, still so breathtakingly raw with power that it hurt to look at him. His breath frosted in the air between them. "You're changing," he said gently. "I don't think it's done. I don't know what it is," she confessed, voice quaking. "I feel hot, like I'm going to melt into ash." He reached out and took her glowing fingers, undeterred by the heat. "Then let me burn with you." They sat in the snow, side by side, watching their breaths drift away like smoke. Kael spoke first. "I've fought battles for my pack, killed for them, even bled for the council, but I've never disobeyed them." He turned his head, "Until you." Aria didn't flinch. "Do you regret it?" He gave a bitter smile. "No. What I regret is not seeing you sooner. The real you. Not just the girl who bled in the snow, but the woman who didn't scream when her body caught fire." She laughed softly, and the sound surprised them both. "I was too scared to scream. Maybe. But even scared. You didn't beg." He looked down at her glowing hands. "You are not broken, Aria. You were forged." Far across the forest, in the cold granite heart of the High Council's fortress, Vyrex stood at the war table, staring at a map littered with silver pins. Aria's name had been added in red ink. Beside it, Kael's. "They've bonded," one of the elders muttered. "Not officially, not fully, but enough." Vyrex's hand curled into a fist. "She's tainting him." Another voice spoke, sharp, feminine, dripping with contempt. "Elder Marika, silver-haired and snake-eyed. Then we remove them both. But Kael is. The bond is incomplete. She hasn't accepted him, which means he's still vulnerable." A new order was inked. "Kill the girl, frame the alpha, and send a message to every unmated wolf in the realm. The old laws still rule." Later that night, Aria sat cross-legged in the center of Kael's room, the firelight flickering across her skin. She was practicing control. Beneath her palms, energy pulsed, raw and red, like molten light. She closed her eyes, inhaled, exhaled. The glow dimmed. Kael watched in silence from the bed, pride softening the lines of his face. "You're learning. And trying." He rose and moved to her slowly, offering a hand. "Come, you need rest." As she slipped into his arms, she realized this was no longer survival. This was trust. This was choice. "Kael," she whispered, voice caught in her throat. "I think I'm falling for you." His chest rose sharply. He looked down at her, hungry, reverent, almost afraid. "Don't fall," he said. "Walk toward me. I'll meet you halfway." Snow melted under her touch. Not metaphorically, literally. Aria stood barefoot on the stone path outside Kael's manor, the frost receding from her skin like it feared her. A thin shimmer of red gold pulsed at her fingertips, something alive, ancient, and as wild as the forest itself. She stared at it, hypnotized. "You're doing it again," Kael murmured behind her. She flinched slightly but didn't turn. "It's not me, it's just happening." Kael crossed the distance slowly, deliberately. The moonlight sliced across his chest, bare, sculpted, marked with old scars that told stories only he could narrate. He stopped a few feet from her, gaze never leaving the strange light in her hands. "It is you, Aria. You just haven't accepted that yet." Her lips parted, the truth heavy on her tongue. "What if I don't want it? What if I just want to be normal? You were never meant to be normal." His voice was low, steady, final. She finally turned to face him. "What happens if I can't control it?" Kael stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating off his skin, the power that called to something buried deep inside her. His hand lifted slowly, palm up, inviting. "Then you let me help you?" The air pulsed between them. For a moment she hesitated, then placed her glowing hand in his. And he didn't even flinch. They trained. Every day for the next week, they trained in the secluded clearing behind Kael's manor, away from the eyes of the pack, away from the whispers growing louder in the shadows. Her powers were wild, unpredictable. At first, they flared when she was afraid, then when she was angry, then when she thought about him. That scared her most. "It's not weakness," Kael told her after her fingertips set the edge of his shirt on fire. "Accidentally, it's instinct." She looked at the charred hem, mortified. "It's dangerous." "So am I," he said simply. Their training wasn't just physical, it was emotional. He pushed her, challenged her, made her confront every broken piece inside, and in return, she watched him lower his armor, inch by inch. He wasn't just the alpha, he was a man with ghosts, and every time he touched her, every time his fingers grazed her wrist or lingered at her waist too long, it felt like a silent vow. "I'm still not ready," she whispered one night, chest heaving, after their sparring turned too heated, too close. Kael's eyes darkened, pupils blown wide, breathing heavy. "I know." He stepped back. "I'll wait," but the pack had begun to talk. Some said the alpha had gone soft. Others whispered about a traitor in their ranks, an outsider with powers that defied tradition, an unmated female who refused the bond. "She's a threat," one elder said. "She's his mate," another replied, quieter. "You can't separate a bonded pair." She rejected him. The tension thickened. Even Kael's beta, Riven, grew restless. "You're not yourself, Kael," he said one night, after a patrol returned with rumors of council movement near their borders. "She's clouding your judgment." Kael leaned over the map, jaw clenched. "She's not clouding anything, she's showing me the truth." "And what truth is that?" Kael looked up slowly, eyes burning. "That the council is afraid of power they can't control, and that includes her, and me." That night Aria awoke from a nightmare, not of Dren, not even of the cage, but of herself, glowing, crackling with red heat, and burning everything she touched. She stumbled into the woods, heart racing, breath uneven. Her powers pulsed erratically, reacting to her fear. Trees blackened in her wake. A rabbit darted by and froze mid-run, overcome by heat. "Stop," she whispered. "Please, stop." She dropped to her knees, sobbing. "I don't want this. I never asked for this." Suddenly, strong arms wrapped around her from behind. "Kael." He didn't speak, he didn't run, he just held her. Even as the heat burned through the fabric of his shirt, even as her powers surged so hard the ground trembled. "Then give it to me," he whispered against her ear. "Give the burden to me, I'll carry it with you." And slowly, her glow dimmed. Her breathing slowed. Her heart steadied, beating in time with his. Later, back in his room, Aria sat on the edge of Kael's bed, wrapped in one of his shirts, legs tucked under her. He knelt before her like a knight before his queen, drying her tear-streaked face with his thumb. "Why me?" she asked softly. Kael looked up at her, eyes sincere. "Because you didn't flinch. You didn't cower. Even when you were bleeding, even when I growled. You stood your ground." He leaned forward, forehead resting against her knee. "You made me want to be better." Aria's throat closed, the silence stretched, and then she whispered, "I didn't mean to reject you." Kael's eyes met hers instantly. "Then why did you?" "Because I didn't believe anyone could want me." "Not really. Not with what I am. Not with what I've seen. I thought you'd claim me because of instinct, and then hate me once you knew." Kael rose, slowly, hands on either side of her thighs. "I don't want to claim you because I have to," he said. "I want to claim you because I choose you." She trembled. "Then claim me." But he didn't. He kissed her forehead and walked away. "When you're ready, completely soul-deep ready, I'll be here, not before." The moon hung heavy and swollen in the sky. It bled silver through the clouds like it knew something the rest of the world didn't. The air was quiet. No chirping crickets, no rustling leaves. Just the soft hum of anticipation that seemed to ripple through the forest, like the world had paused to watch. Aria stood in the middle of the clearing, heart thundering against her ribs. She had followed the pull without thinking, her feet leading her into the woods long after dusk, as though something ancient and unseen was guiding her. The scent in the air was familiar, cedar and musk and warm pine. Kael. She turned slowly, and there he was. Kael stepped out from the shadow of a tree, shirt half open, his chest glowing slightly beneath the moonlight, eyes locked on hers with that same unreadable intensity that always made her legs feel weak. Neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was thick with everything they hadn't said, every glance, every brush of fingers, every moment when the distance had crackled with restraint. "You feel it too," he said softly, voice like dark velvet, "don't you?" Aria nodded, her throat tight. "I do." Kael stepped toward her, one step, then another, and then he was in front of her, his scent wrapping around her like smoke. His fingers brushed the curve of her jaw, tilting her chin up so their eyes met. "Say it," he murmured. "Say what you want." Aria's breath hitched, her lips trembled. "I want you," she whispered. "Not because of the bond, not because it's expected. I want you, Kael, just you." That was all it took. His mouth was on hers in a heartbeat, hot, demanding, desperate. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't careful. It was the kiss of someone who had waited too long, who had held himself back until he couldn't anymore. And Aria melted into it like she'd been waiting her whole life. His hands gripped her waist, pulling her into him. Her fingers threaded through his hair, tugging just enough to draw a low growl from his throat. "I've wanted this," he breathed against her lips, "since the moment you defied me." She laughed softly, breathless. "You mean when I nearly clawed your face off?" Kael smirked. "Exactly that." And then he kissed her again, deeper. They fell back into the grass, Kael's body covering hers as though shielding her from the night itself. His mouth trailed down her jaw to her neck, stopping at the curve where it met her shoulder. "This is where the bond lives," he whispered, "where I'll mark you, if you let me." Aria's breath trembled. "Do it." Kael paused, searching her face. "Once I do this, you're mine. Soul to soul, pack law, no turning back." "Then don't make me wait." His canines lengthened slightly, wolf surfacing just beneath the skin. He lowered his head and bit. The pain was sharp but fleeting. What followed was indescribable. A wave of heat surged through her, head to toe, every nerve lit up. Her wolf howled inside her chest, awake, alive, seen. She gasped as energy crackled down her spine, blinding and fierce and raw. Kael's breath stuttered against her skin. He felt it too. Their wolves met, bonded. The air around them shifted. It was more than physical, it was cosmic. Every atom in her body knew him now. Every heartbeat screamed mate. He pulled back, his lips smeared with a trace of blood, eyes glowing gold. "Aria," he said her name like it was sacred. "You're mine." She pulled him down to her, lips finding his again. "Then take me." Their clothes were discarded with urgency, fingers trembling and eager. There was no shame, no hesitation, just two souls that had circled each other for too long finally falling into orbit. Kael was gentle at first, reverent, but the longer he touched her, the more the fire consumed them both. His hands mapped every inch of her skin, his mouth trailing kisses down her throat, her chest, her stomach, worshipping. "Beautiful," he murmured, voice ragged, "every part of you." And when he finally entered her, they both gasped, because it felt like coming home. Their bodies moved together like they had been made for each other. Every moan, every breath, every whispered name was an echo of something deeper than desire. It was love. It had always been love, masked by fear, cloaked in duty, buried beneath scars. But now it surged to the surface, raw and undeniable. Kael's forehead pressed against hers as they moved in tandem, his voice shaking. "I love you," he whispered. "Even when you hated me, even when you ran, I loved you." Tears welled in her eyes as she cupped his face. "And I never stopped wanting you, even when I told myself I didn't." Their climax came like a wave, slow building, unstoppable, devastating. Their bond flared, sealing, branding, completing. And when it was over, they lay together in the grass, tangled, breathless, marked. Kael wrapped his arms around her, pulling her into his chest as the moon bathed them in soft light. "No more running," he said. Aria closed her eyes, her head resting against his heartbeat. "No more fear." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You're mine now." She smiled faintly, already drifting into sleep. "I always was." The sun rose pale and soft over the Silverclaw pack, as if it, too, were tired from the firestorm of emotion that had burned through the night. Aria stood at the edge of the lake, the hem of Kael's shirt brushing her bare thighs, hair tousled by the breeze, bare toes sunk into the dew-wet earth. The cool water lapped at her feet as if nature itself whispered, "Welcome back." Behind her, she felt him watching. Kael leaned silently against a tree, arms crossed over his chest, a soft smile tugging at his lips as he took her in. Not with hunger, not with dominance, but with awe. The girl who once glared daggers at him, the one who'd refused to kneel, now stood as his equal, his mate, his Luna. "You're staring," Aria said, not turning. "I'm memorizing," he answered, stepping closer, "just in case this is all a dream and I wake up and you're back to threatening to gut me." "That could still happen," she smirked over her shoulder. "Luna or not." Kael chuckled. The sound rumbled deep in his chest, warm and real. "Gods, I love you." Her smile faded, not from sadness, but because it still startled her. Love, spoken aloud, so simply, so honestly. "Say it again," she whispered. He crossed the space between them and wrapped his arms around her from behind, pressing a kiss to the back of her neck. "I love you. And I'm not letting anything take you from me." Not again. But love, however powerful, wasn't enough to stop the world from spinning. When they returned to the pack house, news awaited them like a slap to the face. Alpha Merrick of the Dread Fang pack had declared war. The council had learned of Aria's rejection-turned-mating, and whispers were spreading. Kael's claim on a once-rejected female, an Omega, was viewed as dangerous, a threat to hierarchy, to tradition, the very thing Kael had sworn to tear down. And Merrick? He was just the first wolf to howl against the change. Kael paced the war room, jaw clenched, muscles tight beneath his shirt. Aria sat quietly at the table, scanning the scrolls and maps spread before them. "He's using this bond as a weapon," Kael growled. "As if I mated you to make a statement, didn't you?" Aria asked softly. He looked at her, surprised. "I didn't mean to," he admitted. "But yes, maybe I did. Because loving you, it changed everything. And maybe the pack needs to change too." "Then let them come," Aria said. "We'll show them what power really looks like." He smiled, slow and dangerous. "That's my Luna." A coronation hadn't been planned. But the wolves needed to see her. All of her. That night the forest clearing filled with members of the Silverclaw pack. Torches burned in a wide circle. The elders stood to the side, cloaked and silent. Kael stood tall, black tunic stretched over his chest, and next to him, Aria. But she wasn't in a gown. She wore black leathers, her silver hair braided down her back, a dagger strapped to her thigh. Her mark, a crimson bite scar on her shoulder, was visible for all to see. She didn't smile. She didn't bow. She met their eyes like a queen who had already won the war. Kael took her hand. "This is your Luna," he declared, voice steady. "Chosen not by bloodline, not by legacy, not by convenience. Chosen by bond, by fire, by the will of the gods themselves." The crowd shifted, murmuring. Then from the front, a woman knelt, then a man, then more, dozens. One by one, wolves bowed, not to submission but to unity. To her. Aria's chest ached with the weight of it. "You don't have to kneel," she whispered. "I only ask that you stand with me." They rose, howling in answer. Later that night, Kael and Aria stood on the balcony of their new shared quarters. Below, the pack celebrated, laughter, singing, the scent of meat on open flame. "You're not scared anymore," he said, watching her profile in the moonlight. "I am," she admitted, "but not of you, not of us." Kael stepped behind her, sliding his arms around her waist. "You're the strongest person I know." She leaned into him. "What happens next?" Kael was quiet for a long time. The moon painted his face in silver shadows. "We prepare. For Merrick, for the council, for whatever the world throws next. But we do it together." Aria closed her eyes. Together. Far beyond the mountain ridges, in a hidden stone temple where the council met in secret, 3 wolves stood cloaked in gray. The Silverclaw Alpha has made his move. He's bonded a rejected mate. That union will shift the hierarchy if left unchecked. The 3rd wolf raised his eyes, ice pale and cold. "Then we must break the bond and burn what rises in its place." The storm didn't arrive with lightning. It came quietly, as most devastating things do. In the days following Aria's formal claiming, the Silverclaw pack lived on the edge of breath, waiting, celebrating, preparing. There was laughter in the air and fire in the warriors' eyes, but underneath it all there was a crackle of tension that even the youngest pups could sense. Aria woke before dawn most mornings, not from nightmares anymore but from something else, a pressure building behind her ribcage, the same kind she used to feel just before a fight, or before someone in her old pack decided she wasn't worth the space she took up. But this was different. This was the weight of leadership. She was no longer just Kael's mate, no longer just a rejected Omega trying to survive. She was Luna Aria, and soon she'd need to prove it not just to Silverclaw, but to every pack watching from the shadows. When the messenger arrived, bloodied and barely able to shift, the entire pack gathered at the Great Hall. Aria stood with her back straight, Kael to her right. Warriors flanking both sides. The scroll was sealed in wax, stamped with the sigil of the High Council. "To Alpha Kael of Silverclaw, you have violated traditional order by mating a rejected female. You have insulted our hierarchy, threatened bloodlines, and weakened the sacred structure of Luna law. You are hereby summoned to the Howling Court, to stand before the elders and answer for your rebellion. Failure to comply will result in open war. High Alpha Merrick, on behalf of the Council." Kael crumpled the scroll in his fist. His teeth clenched so hard Aria heard his jaw pop. "They think they can dictate who I love," he growled. "They still believe strength is bred, not earned." "Let them summon us," Aria said calmly. "Let them see who they're dealing with. You're not afraid." She smiled softly. "I was once, before you, before this pack, but now I know who I am, and they need to know too." That night, the War Council convened in the stone chamber beneath the pack house. Torches flickered along the walls. Maps lay unfurled on the table, dotted with stones marking enemy forces. "They'll expect us to come unarmed," said Captain Thorn, Kael's oldest warrior. "A show of obedience." "Then we come armed with truth," Aria answered. "With proof of what our bond is, not just rebellion, but evolution." "They won't care about love," Thorn muttered. "They care about power. Status." "Then we show them both," Kael said. "They think claiming a rejected Omega weakens me? They haven't seen what Aria truly is." He looked at her then, no longer with just affection but with unwavering belief, and it hit her in the chest like lightning. He saw her, not as a weakness, not as an exception, but as his equal. "We go," Aria said, "together, and we don't kneel." That night, Kael couldn't sleep. Aria stirred beside him, sensing his restlessness, and turned onto her side. The moonlight painted her skin silver, and her eyes, when they opened, were wide and calm. "You're thinking too loudly," she murmured. He chuckled under his breath. "I keep wondering how we got here. You rejected me, you punched me." They both smiled, soft and bitter. "But you stayed," he said, "after everything." She reached out and cupped his jaw. "Because I saw something in you. Something that scared me, because it felt like home. You were my mate even when I didn't want you to be. But now..." I choose you, Kael, every day. And I choose you, he said, voice hoarse. Even if the whole world tries to tear us apart. She leaned forward, brushing her lips against his. It was soft, slow, full of unspoken promises and storm-forged understanding. Their bodies moved together like the wind over waves, quiet, unhurried, reverent. When they made love that night, it wasn't rushed or primal. It wasn't about dominance or claiming. It was about belonging. Each kiss was a vow, each touch a prayer. He whispered her name like a secret only he was meant to know. She traced the scars on his chest with trembling fingers, memorizing the topography of the man who'd once broken her, and then rebuilt her with love. Later, when they lay tangled beneath the sheets, sweat slick and exhausted, she whispered, "Whatever happens in that court, I won't be silenced." Kael turned to her, eyes soft and bright. "Then let them hear your howl, Aria." By the end of the week, they were ready. Kael and Aria, dressed in black ceremonial armor, rode at the head of a procession of Silverclaw's finest. Behind them marched warriors, scouts, and emissaries. Not an army, not a threat, but a reminder this pack would not be ignored. As they crossed the valley and headed toward the neutral grounds where the council convened, whispers followed them. The Luna who was once rejected, the Alpha who defied the bloodlines, but Aria heard another whisper underneath them all. Change is coming. The wind was sharp as blades when they crossed the high mountain pass into neutral territory. Frost curled at the corners of the pine trees, the land silent save for the crunch of hooves and boots in snow. Aria could feel it deep in her bones, not just the cold but something far older. This was the seat of power, and power had always hated change. The Howling Court wasn't a palace, it was a mountain carved into obedience. Black stone arched into the sky, jagged spires etched with the runes of ancient alphas. At its center, an amphitheater opened like the maw of a beast, circular and cold, lit only by the dying light of dusk and the fireballs that ringed the arena floor. Aria stepped into it, hand in Kael's, every pair of eyes snapping to her the moment she emerged from the archway. The whisper spread like wildfire. She came, the rejected one, the Luna who wasn't supposed to exist. At the northern seat, elevated above all others, sat High Alpha Merrick. His hair was white, not from age but from frost-gifted lineage. His eyes were the color of steel, his robes layered with pelts from long-dead foes, and on either side of him sat the remaining elders, 7 in total, one for each pack bloodline that ruled the old order. "Alpha Kael," Merrick greeted, voice a low thunder. "You come as summoned." "We do not kneel," Kael replied. Gasps echoed. The brazier flames flickered. Several elders shifted uncomfortably. But Merrick didn't flinch. "And this is the reason, I presume?" He tilted his chin toward Aria. She met his gaze squarely. "I'm not a reason," she said calmly. "I'm a reality." The air turned heavy as a scroll was unfurled. "You are accused," one elder read, "of fracturing the bloodline order by claiming an Omega with no recorded pack lineage, who was previously rejected by her destined mate. This act defies prophecy, tradition, and the governing rituals of Luna succession." "There is no prophecy," Aria cut in, her voice like broken glass. "There's only control." Kael glanced at her, pride radiating off him in waves. She hadn't asked for permission to speak, she claimed it. Merrick's eyes narrowed. "Your place is to be spoken for, Luna, and yet here I am," she replied, speaking, loudly. The amphitheater trembled with murmurs. "You're afraid," she continued, stepping forward. "Not because I'm an Omega, not because I was rejected, but because I survived it, because I didn't stay broken, because I dared to rise when everything in your order is designed to keep someone like me beneath you." The eldest elder, a woman with moon-pale eyes, leaned forward. "What is it you want, girl?" Aria turned slowly, scanning the entire arena. "I want you to understand that strength isn't bred, it's earned. That Luna does not mean silent, that rejection does not mean erasure, and that the next generation of werewolves will not kneel for fear, but stand for choice." For a long time there was silence. Then came laughter. One of the younger elders, Orion, head of the Ashclaw pack, stood. Tall, golden-eyed, and known for his cruelty. "This is all quite inspiring," he said, voice laced with venom, "but emotional speeches don't change laws. The bond you claim with Kael is still a violation." "Is it?" Kael asked quietly. He took Aria's hand again. A glowing blue pulse spread from his chest to hers, visible, raw, sacred. The bond was formed without a moon ritual, Kael said. It wasn't arranged, it wasn't forced. It chose us, and yet it burns stronger than any marked pair I've ever seen. Shall we test its truth? Gasps erupted as Kael raised a blade, a ceremonial dagger tipped in silver. Kael, no, Aria began. Trust me. He slashed it across his chest. Blood poured. His knees buckled slightly. Aria's scream caught in her throat, but she never moved. Because she felt it, his pain, deep in her ribs as if her own body had been cut. And when she stepped forward, placing her hand over his wound, the blue glow ignited again. Only this time, it healed. The court stared, silent. This wasn't just a bond, it was undeniable. Merrick rose, eyes full of storm. You've proven the bond. But the challenge remains, how do we govern the chaos this creates? What happens when other Omegas demand recognition, when bloodlines no longer rule? Aria stood tall, then we adapt, or you fall. They were not arrested, nor were they accepted, but something had shifted. When they returned to the Silverclaw borderlands, packs were already gathering, curious, watching, questioning. Some came to challenge Kael. Some came to court Aria's favor, but none could deny the bond. And in the quiet of the moonlit night, as Aria stood on the balcony of their pack house and stared at the stars, Kael joined her. You shook a kingdom today, he murmured. Good, she whispered. Because it's time, we build a better one. The first snowfall of winter came softly. Flakes drifted across the Silverclaw lands, coating the pine trees in white, cloaking the earth in quiet. From the outside it looked peaceful, tranquil, even. But inside the heart of the pack, something had shifted. Not everyone welcomed the change, and power, when threatened, often seeks to claw its way back. Aria stood in the main hall of the Silverclaw stronghold, her breath clouding faintly in the cold as she surveyed the maps spread out across the oak table. War banners were no longer draped across the walls. In their place, sigils of unity, of new pack alliances that had begun to form since the Howling Court. The door behind her creaked. You're up early, Kael said softly. She didn't turn to him, she was too focused. 3 emissaries from Blood Fang pack arrived before dawn, she said. They've asked for a formal discussion on trade and border sharing. That makes 5 packs this week alone. Kael leaned against the doorway, arms crossed over his chest, shirt rumpled from sleep. That's a good thing. No, she said, finally turning. It's an invitation, and not all of them come with clean hands. Kael walked toward her slowly, his eyes searching hers. There were deeper circles beneath them now, the weight of leadership, of consequence, etched across her beautiful face. What's going on in that head of yours, Aria? She hesitated, then quietly, I don't think the real battle was at the Howling Court. Kael stiffened. Explain. Aria lowered her voice. Change always meets resistance. The court didn't strike us down. But that doesn't mean we're safe. There are still elders who believe what we've done is blasphemy. And if they can't kill the bond, they'll kill one of us. Kael nodded grimly. Or worse, they'll turn our people against us. Later that day, Aria stood before the Silverclaw Council, a circle of 12, made up of longtime allies and newly risen voices. There was Mira, the fierce warrior who'd once sneered at Aria for being an Omega, but had since sworn loyalty after seeing Aria defend a wounded pup in the heat of battle. Ronan, Kael's battle commander, who respected strength above all else. And then there was Daxon. He'd always been a quiet voice. Too quiet. A scholar by name, a shadow by nature, his bloodline traced back to one of the elders who had not approved Kael and Aria's bond at the court. Now, as Aria laid out her vision for an alliance summit that would bring the packs together for peace negotiations, Daxon raised a hand. With respect, Luna, he said, voice as smooth as winter wine. Don't you think you're overextending? We've barely solidified our own borders. Now you want to bring in others? Others who are tired of living in fear, she said firmly. Others who want more for their children than endless bloodlines and arranged bonds. Yes, Daxon, I do. He inclined his head, eyes unreadable. Of course, you're the Luna. But something in his tone felt wrong. That night, Aria couldn't sleep, not because of nightmares, but because of instincts. Her wolf stirred, restless beneath her skin. Something about Daxon's eyes, the way he had looked at Kael, not with respect, not even with anger, but calculation. She left their chambers and padded barefoot down the hall, moving like smoke through the stronghold. She wasn't even sure what she was looking for until she passed the war library. A glimmer of light, and voices. She's getting too bold. It was Daxon. The court may not have acted, but Merrick gave us a path. We just have to make it look like a mistake. Like weakness, the packs will follow whoever survives. Aria froze. And Kael? Another voice whispered. A younger warrior, a loyalist to the old ways. Kael will fall, just like all kings who forget their place. Aria's blood chilled. Her heart slammed in her chest. And the Luna? A pause. We burn her bond from the inside. She didn't run. She returned to Kael, told him everything, and when she did, he didn't shout, he didn't rage, he simply pulled her close and whispered, "Let them try." But Aria wasn't content with waiting. "We end this, on our terms." The next evening, Daxon was summoned to a private council with Kael and Aria. The excuse? To plan the upcoming Alliance summit. He came with the same false smile. What he didn't expect was to walk into a room filled with recording runes, glowing faintly on every wall. Kael sat on the throne. Aria stood beside him, not in a gown this time but in warrior's leathers, her hair braided back, her fingers wrapped around the hilt of a dagger. "Daxon," she said softly, "let's speak truth for once." He didn't get a chance to reply, because behind him, the doors sealed shut, and Mira, Ronan, and half the council stepped forward. "We heard everything," Mira growled. "Traitor." Daxon's mask cracked. "You fools don't see it," he hissed. "You think this is about love? About choice? The court gave us permission to erase this mistake. And you too." Kael rose slowly. "Finish that sentence." Daxon didn't, because Aria stepped forward and plunged the ceremonial blade into the table between them. The room fell into silence. "You wanted fire," she whispered. "Welcome to the flames." Daxon was exiled, his co-conspirators stripped of rank, but more than that, the recordings were sent to every allied pack. Proof of treachery, of the lingering rot still infecting the old bloodlines, and what came next was unexpected: loyalty. Messages poured in, allies pledging to attend the summit, packs long considered rogue offering gifts of trade, Luna councils requesting audience with Aria to learn her ways. Change was coming, and this time, it wasn't crawling, it was charging. That night, as snow fell heavier than it had all season, Aria finally allowed herself to cry. Not for fear, but because she had survived again. Because the mate who once rejected her had not only become her partner, but her equal, her shield, her sword. And Kael, lying beside her in the moonlight, whispered, "The world may hate the bond we forged." He kissed her temple, her neck, her bare shoulder. "But it will never break it." And for the first time since her exile, Aria slept without dreaming of the past. Because her future had finally begun. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you loved it and you would love for a part 2, kindly comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more amazing content. Drop a comment with your favorite moment, and I'll see you in the next one.